The first time ancient humans walked out of Africa and encountered snow, they did not just get cold, they watched their primary food sources vanish into a glowing white blanket that felt like burning fire. Imagine touching a land that bites back with ice, only to realize the strange white dust actually melts into drinkable water right in your hands. How could a substance feel like frozen fire while secretly holding the key to human survival in a frozen world? Our ancestors were born under the blazing African sun, where water was liquid, warm, and familiar. When small bands began drifting north tens of thousands of years ago, they had zero biological preparation for temperatures dropping below freezing. Every instinct told them that when something causes severe pain, you run away from it immediately. So why did these early wanderers push deeper into the pale, silent landscapes instead of sprinting straight back to the warmth of the south? The answer lies in a strange psychological quirk that still drives human behavior today.
When people face a totally alien environment, curiosity often overrides pure survival instincts just long enough to reveal hidden advantages. Those first bands of hunter-gatherers quickly noticed something bizarre about the frozen ground. Animal tracks that used to disappear on hard dirt were suddenly carved into the white surface like an open map.
Imagine tracking a massive reindeer across a meadow, where every single step it took is permanently stamped into the ground. Before snow, hunting required hours of silent stalking, tracking faint smells, and guessing which way a herd scrambled. With a fresh layer of snow, even a novice hunter could follow a giant meal for miles without losing the trail once.
But tracking the prey was only half the battle, because staying outside for more than an hour meant your fingers stopped working entirely. Early humans did not have heavy winter coats, thermal boots, or insulated gloves waiting in a closet. They were stepping into sub-zero winds wearing basic animal skins loosely draped over their shoulders, held together by wooden pins. If you put cold, wet skin against bare human flesh in a blizzard, frostbite sets in within minutes. How did they figure out how to stay warm before the invention of tailored clothing, needles, or thread? They turned to the very animals they were tracking for an answer that reframes how we think about primitive technology. Here is the first major twist. Early humans did not survive the snow by copying animal behavior. They survived by wearing the animals inside out. Raw fur keeps an animal warm because natural oils repel moisture. But if a human wears raw hide with the fur facing outward, sweat builds up inside and freezes against the skin.
The real breakthrough happened when someone turned the hide around, placing the soft fur directly against human skin while scraping the outer hide smooth. This created a microclimate of trapped warm air that wicked moisture away before it could freeze. Suddenly, a fragile tropical mammal could walk through a snowstorm without freezing to death in a matter of minutes. But even with warm clothes, sleeping on top of frozen ground meant dying of hypothermia before sunrise. Think about trying to sleep on a mattress made of pure ice in total darkness. The ground literally steals heat directly from your body through conduction, pulling warmth out of your core faster than your metabolism can replace it.
If you build a camp directly on top of deep snow, your body heat slowly melts the base, turning your sleeping spot into a freezing puddle of sludge. So how did early bands manage to sleep through 8-hour winter nights without freezing solid? They realized that snow itself, the very thing freezing their toes, was actually the ultimate thermal insulator. Air trapped inside fresh powder acts like a barrier that stops heat from escaping into the open sky. By digging down through the snow or packing it into dense walls, they created shelters that trapped their own body heat inside. A cave made of ice can stay surprisingly warm inside, while a howling blizzard rages just inches away on the other side. This brings us to another strange reality about surviving in an endless winter wonderland. In a desert, finding water is a constant life-or-death struggle that limits how far a tribe can travel in a day. In a snowy landscape, water is literally everywhere beneath your feet, covering every tree branch and rock face for miles.
Yet early humans who ate handfuls of fresh snow to quench their thirst rapidly fell ill and suffered severe internal chills. Eating solid snow forces your internal body engine to spend massive amounts of energy melting ice inside your stomach. That sudden drop in core body temperature can trigger severe hypothermia, even if you are wrapped in thick furs.
The first humans to master the snow learned they had to melt it using fire or heat from stones before drinking a single drop. Once they mastered hot liquid from snow, their movement options across frozen continents expanded dramatically. Which brings us to our second big twist. Snow did not slow down human migration across the planet. It actually accelerated it into hyperdrive.
In summer, marshlands, dense bogs, and roaring rivers create massive barriers that block human travel for hundreds of miles. But when winter freezes those rivers solid and covers jagged mountain paths with smooth ice, the entire landscape transforms into a highway.
Groups could walk across giant rivers that were previously impassable, crossing entire valleys in a fraction of the time it took during warm months. Mountain passes that were treacherous piles of loose rock became smooth, packed slopes that could be crossed on foot. Entire continents that were once separated by turbulent sea straits became connected by solid ice bridges.
But moving fast across frozen terrain introduced a terrifying new threat that nobody saw coming until it was too late. If you stare at a vast field of blinding white snow under a clear blue sun for a few hours, your eyes begin to burn with intense pain. The glare reflects up to 80% of UV radiation directly into your retinas, effectively burning the surface of your eyes.
Ancient hunters would suddenly find themselves completely blind in the middle of a tracking run, helpless in a landscape full of predators. How do you invent sunglasses thousands of years before glass, plastic, or tinting even existed? They carved thin strips of bone, driftwood, or walrus ivory with tiny slit openings right across the middle.
By looking through these narrow slits, they blocked out almost all the reflected glare while keeping their field of vision sharp. These primitive snow goggles are among the oldest known eye protection tools in human history, allowing hunters to navigate frozen plains without losing their sight. But avoiding snow blindness was useless if you could not find a single thing to gather or eat.
When snow covers the ground, every berry bush, edible root, leaf, and seed disappears under several feet of white powder. For a species that spent millions of years gathering plant food every single day, this complete loss of vegetation was an existential crisis. The old way of living, where women and children gathered plants while men hunted occasionally, completely fell apart in the winter.
How did early tribes adjust their entire social structure overnight when plant food vanished? They shifted almost 100% of their diet to animal fat and organ meats harvested from massive megafauna. Creatures like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, and giant bison thrived in the cold, carrying huge reserves of rich fat beneath their thick hides.
Eating pure meat provided the dense calories needed to keep human furnaces burning against the bitter cold. But hunting a 4-ton beast in deep snow required a completely new strategy that turned the environment into a weapon. A mammoth running on dry grassland can easily outrun a group of humans carrying short wooden spears. But when that same mammoth steps into a 4-foot drift of soft snow, its massive weight causes it to sink like a stone. Humans, wearing wide snowshoes made of bent wood and rawhide straps, could glide right across the top of the snow crust. They could surround a trapped giant, outmaneuver it with ease, and secure enough food to feed a tribe for months.
This leads directly into our third major twist. Ancient humans did not just endure the brutal cold, they actually grew healthier and lived longer in frozen environments than their cousins in warm tropical zones. In tropical climates, warm standing water is a breeding ground for deadly parasites, bacteria, and mosquito-borne diseases.
The freezing temperatures of Northern Europe and Asia acted as a massive natural sterilizer, wiping out microbes that plagued warm water settlements. Diseases that killed children and elders in Africa simply could not survive in the crisp sub-zero air of the north. Furthermore, deep snow acted as a giant natural refrigerator that preserved tons of excess meat for weeks without spoiling. A single successful mammoth hunt provided hundreds of pounds of fat and protein that stayed fresh inside a snowbank. Instead of hunting every single day to avoid starvation, tribes could relax inside warm shelters for weeks at a time.
This extra free time during long winter nights created a cultural explosion of human art and storytelling around the hearth. When you are stuck inside a warm cave for 3 days during a raging blizzard, you talk, you share legends, and you carve tools. Some of the oldest animal figurines, musical flutes, and intricate cave paintings were created by people sitting out massive winter storms. But staying inside meant keeping a fire burning continuously, which created a whole new logistical nightmare. Finding dry firewood in a landscape covered in 5 feet of wet snow seems almost impossible without modern axes. Green wood buried under snow is frozen solid, and wet branches produce thick smoke that can suffocate everyone inside a cave. Ancient people quickly discovered that dead standing trees, wood that dried out while still upright, stayed dry inside even during blizzards. They also learned to burn dried animal fat in bones, which burned hotter and longer than wet wood ever could. A single mammoth bone soaked in animal grease could burn for hours, providing steady heat and light in the dark. This constant need for fuel forced human bands to become master engineers of airflow, hearth design, and energy conservation. They built low entryways into their shelters that trapped rising heat while forcing cold air to stay outside in the trench. But even with warm fires, navigating a featureless white landscape during a whiteout storm was a deadly trap. When heavy snow falls and clouds cover the sun, the sky and the ground merge into a single solid wall of white. Without a horizon line, human balance breaks down, and you lose all sense of direction within seconds. You can walk in a circle for hours, thinking you are moving in a straight line, slowly freezing as night approaches. How did early travelers navigate across featureless snowfields long before compasses, maps, or landmarks were available? They read the subtle patterns carved into the snow surface by prevailing winds, a technique still used by Arctic cultures today. Wind creates tiny, hard ridges on top of the snowpack that point in predictable directions, like natural compass needles. By watching the angle of these snow ridges beneath their feet, hunters could walk 50 miles across a whiteout and return straight to camp. They also paid close attention to animal behavior, watching how wolves and foxes adapted to changing winter weather. Animals know when a massive blizzard is approaching, hours before human senses pick up the shift in air pressure. When herds of reindeer suddenly stopped grazing and moved toward protected valleys, human bands knew it was time to dig in. Watching predators also revealed another bizarre fact about snow that transformed primitive hunting techniques. Wolves do not just hunt on top of snow. They use deep drifts to store excess food for weeks at a time. Early humans learned to watch where scavengers dug in the snow, frequently discovering frozen caches of meat buried by other predators. This concept of storing food under snow inspired humans to build their own underground ice cellars. They dug deep pits into the permanently frozen soil beneath the snow, creating storage rooms that stayed frozen year-round. This allowed them to store summer fish and autumn game well into the deep winter months. This brings us to our fourth surprising twist. The first encounter with snow did not trigger a scramble for survival. It triggered the birth of human trade networks across thousands of miles. Different tribes occupying snowy mountain passes held access to unique resources like high-quality flint, furs, and ivory. Because traveling across frozen rivers was so much faster than summer trekking, winter became the primary season for inter-tribe trading meets. Groups would gather on frozen lakes that served as neutral meeting grounds where no single tribe held a home advantage. They traded dried meat, specialized winter clothing, amber, and rare stones used for making sharp tools. These frozen trade fairs allowed ideas, languages, and genetic diversity to spread faster than ever before in human history. But living on ice also meant dealing with sudden, catastrophic shifts in the environment that could wipe out a tribe in minutes. A sudden warm spell followed by a hard freeze creates a layer of crystal-clear ice over the top of the snowpack. For animals like reindeer and horses, this rock-hard ice layer seals their food source beneath an impenetrable shield. The animals cannot dig through the ice with their hooves, causing massive herds to starve or migrate hundreds of miles away overnight. When the food walked away, human tribes had to adapt instantly or face complete starvation. Instead of chasing missing herds across icy plains, some coastal tribes turned their attention to the frozen ocean edge.
Sea ice created a brand new ecosystem where air-breathing marine mammals like seals had to surface through tiny breathing holes. By waiting patiently beside a hole in the sea ice for hours, a single hunter could harpoon a seal as it took a breath.
This coastal winter lifestyle opened up an endless supply of rich blubber, waterproof hides, and bone materials. Think about how counterintuitive it is to stand on top of a frozen ocean to catch a sea creature living beneath the ice. The ocean, which was an impassable barrier during the summer, became a solid hunting ground that extended miles from the coast.
Waterproof boots made from oiled seal skin allowed hunters to wade through slushy ice water without getting their feet wet. But mastering cold water was only possible because they solved the problem of keeping their tools from snapping in sub-zero air. Extreme cold makes stone, bone, and wood extremely brittle, causing spear points to shatter upon impact with frozen animal hide.
If your only spear snaps on your first attempt to hunt a bear, you are left completely defenseless in the wild. Ancient toolmakers discovered that treating flint with controlled heat before shaping it made the stone far more resilient to thermal shock. They also learned to soak bone and antler in warm water before carving them into flexible, shatterproof harpoons.
This relentless cycle of problem-solving drove a massive leap in human brain power and technological innovation over just a few generations. The harsh demands of snow selected for planning, forward thinking, and complex communication like no environment before it. You could not afford to be lazy or unstructured when a single mistake meant freezing to death before morning.
Every winter was a brutal test that eliminated weak strategies and rewarded clever, adaptable thinking. Now, consider our fifth and final major twist. Snow did not force ancient humans to adapt to a dead world. It actually preserved the ancient world for us to discover thousands of years later.
The deep freezing temperatures preserved organic materials like wooden bows, leather shoes, stitched clothing, and even tattooed human skin that would have rotted away in warm soil within months. Almost everything we know about how ancient people actually dressed, worked, and looked comes from artifacts preserved in snow and ice.
When ice patches and mountain ranges melt today, they reveal perfectly preserved hunting tools left behind by Ice Age hunters thousands of years ago. We can see the exact stitches used to sew fur coats, the feathers attached to arrow shafts, and the woven grass liners inside their snow boots.
These discoveries prove that the first humans to see snow were not primitive brutes shivering helplessly in dark caves. They were brilliant engineers, master trackers, and daring explorers who turned a freezing nightmare into their greatest advantage. They looked at a land covered in silent white dust and saw opportunities where other animals only found hardship.
They learned to walk on top of deep drifts, sleep inside walls of ice, and use the cold to preserve their food for months. The skills developed during those first encounters with snow allowed our ancestors to spread into every corner of the globe, surviving conditions that should have wiped us out. It turns out that stepping into the cold was not the end of the human story. It was the moment we truly conquered the planet. When you look out at a quiet snowfall today, do you see a peaceful winter scene? Or can you still feel the primal thrill of standing on the edge of an unknown frozen world?